let's go over the list that I wanted to talk about today. One of the ones I want to go over. This was a under the radar event because it was very, very small. As for it was only like 18 players, which is really much an RTT size event. I mean, some RTTs that some of us attend is 28 players or so. So the 4 rounds is what's important here. But what I really wanted to do is just look at how awesome it was to see a Dread mob list. So we have a beautiful Dread mob list that's up in the air, right? So we have a Big Mac. Yes, the Big Mac has made another appearance. Guys are starting to figure him out. We have with the custom Mega Blaster. We have a Big Mac with Shock Attack gun with Get Finder goggles. I think at least one of the Shock Attack guns with Get Finder goggles is at this point an auto take for your Dread mob. You don't need to spam them. You just need one at least. Then you have 2 mechs. And you'll see why. 4 minimum sized units of Gretchen. I think they're very useful to have them if as the reactive move. And when you look at the rest of the list, how they'll come into play is not only screening your backfield, but screening and reactive moving in the way of some of these big stompy things. Then you have only 1 dedicated transport, followed by what I like to call the nuke Deff Dread, where he just pretty much shows up on the table with 4 custom Mega Blasters and jumps out from the side of the table, utterly destroys something or takes a huge damage on it, and then blows himself up from hazardous tests. So he's like I call the nuke, still very fun, and he's actually quite useful. He's not like necessarily just a meme. We have a Gorkanaut and a Morkanaut. Yes, the very thematic list of a Gorkanaut and a Morkanaut made their appearance, but they also got stuck in with a max unit of Killa Kans and 2 3-man units of Killa Kans, followed by the one, the only unit of knobs. But the twist here is the unit of knobs has big choppas. Yes, boys, we have finally made it to the big choppas. The reason I think that is Dread mobs seem to suffer with large amounts of units, right? If there's 20-man units and certain 10-man units, they might struggle to just straight clean up that unit, and you don't really need to pay for the war mods for the power claws because everybody else is trying to do that high octane damage that way anyway. So instead, you want to give the knobs to big choppa, the big mech, so you can run through screens. Let's see if someone's trying to screen your Morkanaut or your Gorkanaut from getting stuck in. Your knobs can essentially get out and run through that screen and hit the backline unit that was back there. And of course, they get to take advantage of push the button, right? So you can still take sustain. You can still get lethal on that if you have to punch something a little tougher than you want, or risk it all and go for the additional AP, which never do that. So, well, not never, but you know what I'm saying. So this is very much different. I actually really like to see this. How you see this list playing out is, you know, you have your truck so you can stage and set up where you need your knobs on the battlefield with the Big Mac. Each Titanic model will get their mech. In some ways, they can actually stand within buildings and score secondaries for you while they're actually enjoying their loan up and standing behind their big stompy Titanic model. How these guys work is that they can actually stage behind some of these new terrain setups in a safe manner from getting shot off the table too reliably, and then peek up over and shoot at someone, or really make their way around the terrain with their auto. You know, they can actually advance and charge advance and shoot with the strat, and with that strat, it allows them to re-roll their advances, so it naturally stacks with on the wall turn. You're going to advance and shoot one of these units, which ends up being kind of the Gorkanaut, but the Morkanaut can do it too. Some people see the Gorkanaut as the strategic reserve unit that comes in. In this case, you can actually use the Killa Kan unit for that as well, as they're pretty slow, but then you kind of have a hard time moving around that side of the table, right? More times than not, you're going to run the 3-man units of Killa Kans on the flanks of this table, or maybe even bait in the middle of the table for that. So this list is quite thought out, as I'm going to walk up with tough things. You're going to clap back at me. I'm going to actually trade out with you if it's a low, let's say low point vehicle unit that you want to kind of just delete off the table because it's getting in your way. That's where the Deff Dread comes into play. He's a low cost investment, so somewhat reliably really damage something or softens a very problematic unit before Killa Kans get in it or your Morkanaut and Gorkanaut get in it. What the knobs really help too is that a lot of the time when you're facing these these Titanic units, you're facing armies that can stage in buildings and then jump out and attack you with their infantry that shoots you really well. Let's say Sister was Meltas or Eradicators, a unit of 8-bound. That's where the knobs can come in, kind of bypass your screen and then charge something that's in the way, trying to counter you and your Titanic units or even your Killa Kans, as they're quite drastically slow. So keep that in mind as you look into this. Of course, you can use 30 or 20 grots to screen your home field, but sometimes more than not, you want to put them in your Gorkanaut and your Morkanaut, jump out, either play for the primary or act as a screening unit and or reactive unit, so that people can't really get stuck into your big Titanic models, as even though they're Titanic, they're a little bit soft. Today's sponsor, Baron of Dice. So Baron of Dice has great dice. They have actually enabled us to give these dice out for our paint competitions. So I greatly advise that you go out there. We have a link in the description for 5% discount. That's of course because nobody likes taxes. Shout out to the Baron of Dice because they are actually customizing orc dice just for us that you guys will be able to get a hold of, and they look exceptional. So shout out to Baron of Dice. Really appreciate you guys, and I really do suggest you get them. I love the actual texture these dice have. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So let's take a look at my boy's list because his matchups, because that's always important when you're playing Dreadmod, right? You want to see who did you end up playing to beat. Can I even take Ork and Mork? And my boy did right here. So the game he went into was Leagues of Ultan. We have an Iron Here champion, a Grimnir, a Call with Grim Demeanor, 1 unit, 2 units of these Hearthkin Warriors. Of course, being able to combat squad them, so break them up into 5-man units, I think is quite useful if they transport spam, but in this case, they didn't transport spam. You have 2 Sagittars, still very good for their point cost. You got to be aware of that with scouting. Scouting, infiltrating, baby boys, it's everywhere, right? Just keep that in mind, and your meta might not have adopted it yet, but it's very much on the table in most events you're going to go to. Then you have 1, 2 units of these Broknir Thunderkin, 1 unit of the Berserkers. Remember, they're indirect. You win it, guys. So indirect weapon, it can slow you, but it has to happen on the 4+. And then we have 1, 2 units of the Hearthguard. Let's see, they have, let me see, make sure they have the same weapons. No, they don't. One does have the plasma gun, and the other one has the Volkite disintegrator. So it is interesting to take different weapons. That they take also concussion. Yeah, they both took the concussion gauntlet stuff. 1 Land Raider Fortress, followed by 2 units of Pioneers. Now, like we talked about with the nuke, like I'm talking about the Deff Dread, he couldn't completely destroy something like a Land Fortress, and there's a chance the Land Fortress just straight up tanks it because he could still get great saves. So you don't necessarily want to put him into that unless he's not getting cover because they could just Armor of Contempt and you only have 2 AP, all these different problems. But he does go good into something like a Sagittar. Sure, he's 15 points more than a Sagittar, but the point here is that you don't really have anything to kill a Sagittar reliably, and you're not looking to bounce, a Titanic unit to just peek the corner, try to shoot him, and then get hit in response and shot and then countercharged too easily. So Sagittars, they can also go down to a Luda Bomb, right? Luda's ignoring cover. The SAG really goes off right there with its additional AP. Mind you, the SAG most of the time does most of the damage. And even though I'm a fan of Luda's, just understand the damage differential between being on an objective and not is drastic. And when you're not on an objective, the Ludas almost do no damage. And then it really just comes down to, does the shock attack going to do his thing? So that thing's cool with that. As for the Terminator squads, they're good for volume. They can kind of punch up into big dudes. But what's good about us is our sweep attacks do okay into them, not unless they Armor of Contempt. But our high damage smash attacks do great into them. Something like your knobs with the power, the big choppas can come in here and clean up a lot of these infantry units, such as Berserkers. If you touch Thunderkin, if you touch the guard, the basic, I call them, they're not guard, Hearthgear Warriors, that's where you actually take advantage of the big choppas, where you're like, oh, you guys are 2 wounds, and you're just that weird toughness of 6. Well, I got something for you with volume. Bah! So I really like that. And of course, the big Mac punches moderately well too. I think we're going to see a little bit more of the Leagues of Ultan, but it's just going to take a while for them to kind of understand how they want to use their new infiltrators, or I think they're scouts or something. I'm at a brain fart right now. But it also comes down to knowing their rules and then understanding how to react when they judgment token certain units. So they would look at your Morkanaut Gorkanaut and be like, I'm going to judgment token that, I'm going to judgment token that, and your Killa Kans unit. And you're like, well, I got to make do with my other Kans unit. And when it is my time to shine, it's more reactive, which means they can't take advantage of their army-wide rule if they choose your big dudes early, because you can kind of mostly hide them. And then in response, your other units, such as your Killa Kans, your Ludas, your Deff Dread, can actually pop out, respond, and do a lot of damage. Then when they're reacting to you and your big Titanic stuff, they've lost some of their ability there, right? And then Killa Kans do great into something like those Thunderkin. So if you can get off on those Thunderkin and actually get a charge off into them, you're gravy. You're on the gravy train right there, and that's actually what feels really good. He did end up getting 92 points there, so I think things went his way, and he understood how to kind of maneuver having to run into their oath targets, right? But you just got to keep that in mind when you're going into Leagues of Ultan. If they oath one of my favorite units, then they don't have an army rule until I expose that oath unit. To a certain degree, right? Then we go into the Gene Stealer cults. See, I told you we're better than that. We just beat them with Dreadmouth. No, I'm just kidding. So Gene Stealer cult, not super familiar with all of their detachments at the moment. Armies like this, you can kind of see them getting reworked anyway. So get familiar if you're going to face them, but I wouldn't be surprised if most people just don't see them. So we have the Outlander Claw. We have 3 Kelamorphs. Those are the little sniper characters. A Sanctus, followed by a 10, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5 of Acolyte hybrids and hybrid 1 unit of hybrid metamorphs. Then 3 units of Adelan Jackals. That's pretty cool. That's cool. 2 by 2 units of the Achille Ridge Runners, and then 3 of the Goliath Rock Grinder. What I am familiar with is I'm pretty sure these Goliath Rock Grinders will give +1 to wound when you disembark from them and do damage. This is one of those things that you're glad to have the knobs with the big choppas, as you can actually run into these units, pick up the little bit of annoying bodies they have, not necessarily die in response, and then continue to beat them up even if you take minimum damage as you move forward and on them. Looters can go crazy if one of these units comes in off the onto an objective. Overwatch is disgusting into any of these units that are on the table. And then you, of course, for the Rock Grinder and the Achilles Ridge Runner, you do have the proper weapons to actually kill them, as this is one of the armies that doesn't have Armor of Contempt. So you're feeling really good with some of your, low AP shooting. That's typically a problem for Orks, is that we lack AP in our shooting. So we hate to see those really high toughness stuff, right? Gene Stealers don't have that. Then in his third matchup, he went into Blood Angels. Now, this was still a win before we look at his Blood Angels list, where he got 100 points. So he called this the pile of shame with the Sons of Sanguinius, where Sons of Sanguinius do quite well into a typical punching Orc army. Sometimes we have more assets than them, and it is a dice game, but Orcs just seem to have tools into Blood Angels sometimes. So we have Captain with a jump pack with Artisans of War, Chaplain with jump pack, Librarian and Phobos armor, and Sanguinary Peace Priest with a jump pack. He's fantastic, gives additional AP, and feel no pain, so that's cool. 1 big unit of Assault Intercessors. They actually get to a cool strength threshold of 6. So if these dudes, for some reason, do get into, let's say, your Killa Kan unit, and especially if you're on an objective or rerolling wounds, you could take some nasty damage from that because the volume is just so intense. 1 unit of Intercessors, followed by another unit of Assault Intercessors with jump packs, 1 blue Talus Dread, a Death Company Marines with jump packs, Thunderhammers, Power Fist, Inferno Bolters, some Chainswords. You don't really want to see Chainswords on this unit, especially when you're going into this matchup where you're like, I actually want some bigger hard-hitting things with some AP. Our Titanic stuff does have a good enough strength threshold for them, but still, actually, it's all right into them, but we're still winning us on 5. We have Eliminators, Inceptor Squad, Sanguinary Guard, quite expensive, and then here's the weird part of the list: a Storm Raven gunship, and then a Storm Talon gunship. I'll just rate up right off the bat, this Storm Talon gunship, not where it's at. I appreciate him for trying, but no thank you. Storm Raven can sometimes have its moment. You're just not really getting an army and benefit from here. Of course, he just needs more stuff like the Death Company units, as he would run out of steam into us, and we can actually kill something like a Brutalis Dreadnought. Usually some of the Orc detachments can't. The Dread Mob actually can, and Grots help with you to be able to screen, reactive screen. And it just feels really good to have, like I said, knobs with 10-man units of knobs when you're going into Assault Intercessors or going into Jetpack dudes, where you want a lot of damage to in volume, and maybe even more volume because you can put sustain on them, right? And these these Chainswords kind of just not where it's at for those Death Company. Not the most competitive version of Blood Angels, but they do have great rules, and Josh Morton did overcome them. Now, this is something that I'm sure a lot of people are going to be understanding and familiar with, is World Eaters. World Eaters are still very popular in the meta. They're very elite armies, so they're never going to have too much variety. This one had a little more than I'm used to, as it did go pretty character heavy. So we have Angron, super annoying, obviously, coming back. If he comes back, game changing. If he doesn't, you kind of win. Karn the Betrayer, great for fighting on death. Lord Invocatus, I actually did pull up his data sheet just because I think some people are gonna be more familiar and having to see him real quick so you can understand what he's doing here. He can go with something like the 8-bound, Exalted 8-bound, who have Scout, or and then he also gives 2 World Leaders within 6 inches of this model. World Eater infantry units within 6 inches of this model. All units have Scout ability 6, so he's giving Scout to units that don't have Scout, and then he has Scout as well on the units that do have Scout. So this World Eater army is going to be going crazy with its Scout, because I also can show you they're 8-bound. They're 8-bound also already have Scout. So in that case, you could put the World Lord Invocatus with them as well. Not that I'm necessarily saying you would do this with the 8-bound, but he has Scout 2 So he could be, let's see, look at the list real quick before I start rambling on, because it's a weird mix of, he actually a lot of character support here. So of course, one Berserker unit's going to get Karn just because they need the Karn escort. It feels really powerful in that. The other Karn Berserker unit is more likely just getting a Lord on Juggernaut. And then one of these 8 bounds could get a character, maybe 2. They could choose not to use them because they have weird movement differentials. Just remember, 8 bound already move 8. They can get +2 to their movement. Then they can auto advance 6. So you can actually very much get around the terrain that's a problem and actually kind of conga line that unit forward and get more space out of there in distance. Now, when you look at the cheap, battle line type units with these 3 units of Jackals, 3 units of Jackals can actually slap moderately well, especially into something like a Grot unit, like as you could say. And the one thing here in this matchup, when you're looking at Dread Mob, is they can sticky objective the middle of the table or even the sides of the flank objectives, causing you to have to go and commit to them with something like a 3-man unit of Killa Kans or something like that. And in that case, 8 bound very much can just auto advance 6, advance and charge onto you and beat the crap out of you. They have the perfect profiles as 8 bound, and these exalted 8 bound, they have great profiles into our Titanic models. Not to mention, Angron himself can play KG because he could just stay back as well. Do the same thing of auto advance 6 for 1 CP on the strat and really get stuck into one of your Titanic models. You don't have one fight on death. Even shooting at him doesn't feel really good because he does have a 2-up armor save, so it doesn't feel that good with Orc AP shooting at him. You're like, oh, 3-up save, sure, bro. Like, I hope your Deff Dread really goes off right here, which he might, but then Angron might just come back. So this game's always on the table. It's so chaotic. This does require you usually to have your own fight on death and volume of reliable punching and a little bit more assets than them. In this case, because you were a Dread Mob list, because you're a Dread Mob list, you don't have as much assets. You're quite valuable. So if you make one mistake, it's like a 300-point mistake or something like that. Not really exactly 300, but we're rounding up a little bit, right? 250, somewhere a little less than 300-point mistakes can easily happen. Even a unit of Berserkers can get into a 6-man unit of Killa Kans and really crump them. And I found my Killa Kan shooting to be quite unreliable, even if they are with all rocket. But that's we should all just become familiar with World Eaters, as they're definitely here to stay. 42-point win, loss there, that he took from the World Eaters. I think something like Warhorde does great. Lily Boys is totally fine. And to World Eaters, Dread Mob do have that problem of you can stage very tiny units, really hard to shoot profiles, and then jump out and hit me. Not to mention that basic 8 bound give rerolling 1s to wound, mean that even Berserkers going up and punching early into your Killa Kans being strength 8, rerolling 1s to wound, they can still really crump you. So be familiar and just understand that screening is very important. And when you're playing Warhorde, you have a little bit more tools there. Now, as for his last matchup, he went into, this is a little bit jumbled and weird to see, but this is a Dark Angels army with Gladius Task Force. He's a Librarian Terminate Armor, a Lieutenant Azrael, and Lionel Johnson. The Lieutenant does have Fire Discipline, and the Librarian does have Artificer Armor. He has 1 unit of Heavy Intercessors, normal 5-man unit of Intercessors, 1 Deathwing Knight unit, followed by 1 unit of Eradicators, 10 Hell Blasters to take advantage of that Fire Discipline, and then Inceptor Squad with Plasma, 2 Infiltrator Squads, Inner Circle Companions, and a Gladiator Lancer. Typically, something like a Deathwing Knight unit just wants to kind of come forward and maybe even advance and charge you and take advantage of your Orcs. You only have damage 2. In this case, you're dealing with a bunch of damage 3, even damage 6. They can end up taking huge losses here. Eradicators can do very well into Titanic, but like I said, we can actually wait it out and then just touch and tag onto an objective. Eradicators do have to get relatively close. That's why something like Knobs is really good for that. You can run out and actually punch those units that are trying to stage up on you. Hell Blasters are the problem where they can actually volume out Killa Kans super reliably, but you being able to reduce damage by 1 means you could just take it for a ride and actually try to survive that. What it comes down to here is he doesn't have enough units that can actually deal with our high toughness. Intercessors are doing nothing. Heavy Intercessors are doing nothing. These 2 units of Infiltrators doing nothing. The Lancer can maybe kill, you're going to kill 1 Killa Kan a turn if your big unit Titanic units are coming out. So Dread Mob is not, I'm going to put all my big stompy stuff right in your face right away and take all your damage. It's put these Killa Kans forward. and try to draw beta stuff out. So before we go back, we're going to go back to the list here, but he did end up winning this one. We're going to go over a little bit more of Dark Angels. I'm going to show this because actually both players we went over today went over Dark Angels, so I think it's good that we come familiar with Dark Angels. So let's take a look at something like this Deathwing Knights squad, right? Just keep in mind up here I have it as inner circle because on the list we're going to cover does that, but Gladius, everybody's pretty familiar. They have access to Lance, so they can still get +1 to wound. They can advance and charge. That's the strength of a Gladius. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these Deathwing. Now these Deathwing do have inner circle, which is where they subtract damage by 1. They have mortal wound ability to ignore feel no pain once per battle. Oops, sorry, I'm showing up too much stuff. And then they actually have, depending on the person, some people like to bring swords, some people bring maces. I think maces are more common and more likely to be up in your face. They are 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 6, -2, 2+, but they're also anti-monster, anti-vehicle, 2 4+, 4+. So keep in mind of these Deathwing Knights, they're going to be common. You take 3 big bricks of them. Something like Dread Mob actually has tools to kill them, but if you see something like a Warhorde list, you're going to struggle a little bit more, or even like a Bully Boys list where you might just be like, oops, all my stuff is damaged too. I don't think I'm killing you reliably. Oops. So before we do that, I also want to take a look at the Librarian Terminator, just because in this case, he was actually on this list when I showed it, right? Librarian Terminator armor right here, bloop, just so you guys can see. He can also go with Deathwing Knights, and what he does is he gives them the sustain 1 ability, and then they keep their feel no pain, but nobody cares about that because they already have that. And he, of course, gives them a little bit of witch fire for shooting, but it's not a big. The real thing here is that he gives them sustain 1. They're already hitting on 2s, increases their volume and reliable damage output because they can't just simply stand there as a 5-man unit. They can take losses, so they do want to crack you back a bit when you hit them. So now, before I end it, let's take one more look at my boys Dread Mob list, just for all those who just got here so you can see them. We have a Big Mac Custom Mega Blaster, Big Mac with Shock Attack Gun, Get Finder Goggles for the 10-man unit of Ludas, 2 mechs, 1 each for the Gork and the Mork, 4 minimum size units of Gretchen, 1 truck to escort that Knob with Big Chopper unit and their Big Mac, 2 3-man units of Killa Kans, 1 big unit of Killa Kans, followed by the nuke Deff Dread, where he just has 4 custom Mega Blasters, jumps out, pops some CP, hopes to take something down with them, rolls a bunch of hazard checks, blows himself up. Bam! Love to see it. I actually really like this list. Very flavorful. I hope this encourages a lot of people to play Dread Mob and understand that you can very much play with the Gork and Mork. It is, of course, meta dependent. If you're playing on UKTC with something like Astra Militarum, I'm sorry, your Gork and Mork are going to get beat up and shot off the table kind of reliably. If you're going into Dark Eldar and other Dark Lances are on the table, you're probably going to get killed quite reliably. So there are armies, maybe Tau, that are going to reliably destroy your Gork and Mork. But as we went for over several of the events and lists, over the list today, some of those lists just simply didn't have the tools to kill the Killa Kans in a reliable effort without overcommitting their most expensive units, and then that allowed the Gork and the Morks to come out and start killing stuff for point value trades. The knobs to be able to run through screens, I'm sure, did come into play once in a while, as people did have infiltrators and scouts in their armies. So then that's where you can kind of run through terrain, not only run through terrain, but run through the screens and then hit the soft, juicy target that's trying to hide in a building like a unit of Eradicators. So that's how this list most likely played out. Tell me if I'm wrong if you're out there, Josh Morton. But let's get a whoa for Josh Morton and his Dread Mob. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!